Came a little bit early, and when I was looking at the shade, he was smiling. He's happy here in his little home. Let's see when we sit down if we can see it again. It doesn't look so much like a smile, but rather we can see his teeth. There, just a bit, just like the image above. Our shade's happy with his little home. We've just finished using all of our paper, so we're going to have to make another trip if we're going to make more artwork. And it's worthwhile because every 2 paintings we create, the time is speeding up by another second. As you can see, it's 6 seconds per tick now. So in 10 days, it would have been 60 days, which is nice, but still not enough. Our shade also had finished reading the Iliad on his own. There wasn't anything really significant at the end of the book, but sometimes there is, like Moby Dick. Just to review, the shade did make his own little comment down there. Let's turn off idle reading. And we're going to attempt to continue. This book is dense. It's really difficult to read. Wish it wasn't so, but that became the way of philosophy reading for a lot of people. I'm not certain why. I understand with poetry why you want to make these really gaudy words, because it causes the reader to slow down. With philosophy, however, you're trying to express something, a new way of thought that perhaps the reader has never had before. So why would you cover it in all this dense gaudiness that makes it difficult to even read or understand? I know there's a very famous philosopher who lived out in the woods for many days and just wrote a bunch of things. A lot of people appreciate his work and what he wrote, and they'll go out, they'll make a pilgrimage to where this person lived in their small cabin that apparently they built themselves. And I don't know why they do the pilgrimage, but it's meaningful to them. And that's fine. I don't mean to take anything away from those people who enjoy that. But the works that individual wrote, they're very thick, they're very gaudy. It's kind of like the idea of a dragon being very prideful. That if you were to be captured by a dragon, if you could persuade the dragon on how lovely it is and how magnificent it is, then the dragon will perhaps forget to eat you and let you live, because it's like, oh, I am, aren't I? I am this wonderful thing you say I am. And I feel like this person, when I forget their name, that's why I keep saying this person. I feel like they wrote their words in a way that would charm the tail off dragon. And I don't know why they did it, but here we are trying to read more philosophy, and it's following that same pattern. It's strange to me because this person, in their writings, they were talking about the common ordinary man and how he wants to teach them things. However, the common ordinary man, especially in their times, they weren't very fluent in a lot of language, especially reading or writing. So why would you make it even more difficult for them to understand what it is you're trying to say? I feel like what he's saying and what he's doing are two very different things. just sharing some of my musings, but what else do? We have 400 days. I spent the last couple of days mentioning how we're going to be in this pattern of one day reading, one day going out and exploring. And that's because the things we can do while we're out and exploring, they're going to run out. And that's intended. The developer never intended for you to have 400 days worth of content, 400 days of things to do and to keep you occupied, that they want you to feel the longing, even with all the time we're saving by reading, playing music, and making time move faster, that it's just going to become a longing that you're just going to have to sit and wait to get through it at some point. And that the things that are interesting that can take our mind off of that, such as going out and exploring, filling up a little pool of water in a month's time, which is very close to now, actually. Eventually, those things will run out, and there will be nothing but us and the time we have left to spend. So, yeah, we're reading to try to fill that time and to leave something as a treat for ourselves. That way, when we go out and explore, it's satisfying us in that way. And this is a lore playthrough. Is this necessary for us to go through the 400 days? Yes. Yes, it is. Because there are some things, other than the ending, that I mean to see for myself and to discover. And to do so, we'll have to reach the end of 400 days. We have a good bit of content still to fill. There are endings and such, but as you can see, we're only 1/10, actually not even 1/10 through. Once we reach 40 days, we'll be at 1/10 through the time we need to spend. So we've got quite a bit to go. Hello, Mayas. Mayas. Like a snake, though. Sss. Welcome. I'm about to start trying to read this book. This book is hard to understand. Are you familiar with The Longing? Have you played The Longing? I'm curious. The despisers of the body. To the despisers of the body will I speak my word. I wish them neither to learn afresh nor teach anew, but only to bid farewell to their own bodies, and thus be dumb. What? So those people who despise the body, he wants them to say goodbye to their own bodies. Body am I, and soul, so saith the child, and why should one not speak like children? This is following, I guess, some of the things we read before, how these children were talking to a wise man. It calls them children. Can I speak French? I cannot. I can switch the game to French. I believe I have the option. However, I wouldn't be able to understand it, especially if I'm reading the book. I don't want to butcher the language. Oh, he completely got out of his chair. So saith the child, and why should one not speak like children? But the awakened one, the knowing one, saith, Body am I entirely, and nothing more. And soul is only the name of something in the body. Body is a big sagacity, a plurality with one sense, a war and a peace, a flock, a shepherd. An instrument of thy body is also thy little sagacity, my brother, which thou callest spirit, a little instrument and plaything of the big sagacity. Ego, sayest thou, and art proud of that word, but the greater thing in which thou art willing to believe is thy body with its big sagacity. It saith not ego, but doeth it. Now, we have idle reading on. What the sense feeleth, what the spirit discerneth, hath never its end in itself, but sense and spirit would fain persuade thee that they are the end of all things. So vain are they. Instruments and playthings are sense and spirit. Behind them there is still the self. The self seeketh with the eyes of the senses. It hearkeneth also with the ears of the spirit. Ever hearkeneth the self, and seeketh, it compareth, mastereth, conquereth, and destroyeth. It ruleth, and is also the ego's ruler. Behind thy thoughts and feelings, my brother, there is a mighty Lord, an unknown sage. It is called self. It dwelleth in thy body. It is thy body. There is more sagacity in thy body than in thy best wisdom. And who then knoweth why thy body requireth just thy best wisdom? Thyself laugheth at thine ego and its proud prancings. What are these prancings and flights of thought? And to me, it saith to itself, a byway to my purpose. I am the leading string of the ego, and the prompter of its notions. The self saith unto the ego, feel pain, and thereupon it suffereth, and thinketh how it may put an end thereto. And for that very purpose it is meant to think. The self saith unto the ego, feel pleasure. Thereupon it rejoiceth, and thinketh how it may ofttimes rejoice. And for that very purpose it is meant to think. To the despisers of the body will I speak a word. That they despise is caused by their esteem. What is it that created esteeming and despising and worth and will? The creating self created for itself, esteeming and despising. It created for itself joy and woe. The creating body created for itself spirit as a hand to its will. Even in your folly and despising, ye each serve yourself. Ye despisers of the body, I tell you, your very self wanteth to die, and turneth away from life. No longer can yourself do that which it desires most. Create beyond itself. That is what it desireth most. That is all its fervor. But it is now too late to do so. So yourself wisheth to succumb, ye despisers of the body, to succumb. So wisheth yourself, and therefore have ye become despisers of the body, for ye can no longer create beyond yourselves. And therefore are ye now angry with life and with the earth, and unconscious envy is in the sidelong look of your contempt. I go not your way, ye despisers of the body. Ye are no bridges for me to the Superman. Thus spake Zarathustra. Okay, so this is going back to days before, how Zarathustra was talking about the sickly, and how these sickly folk begin to think of beyond, what is the word that they used here? It was called the backworldsmen. He's talking about these backworldsmen, these people who hate their own body and seek for things beyond it. And he's just giving detail for, this soul that you pride yourselves on and how you want it to carry on. It's part of your body. And if you're saying you hate the body, it's part of it. And that all the things that these people create and imagine beyond themselves. He's saying, not a bridge to the Superman. It's not, as he was, if I recall, he was saying lives could be spent to build a bridge, to evolve from the worm to the ape to the man to the Superman. And in order for Superman to exist, that humankind need to evolve. But this way of thought, these people who despise the body, their way of thought is not contributing to that bridge. It's not building towards the Superman. And he's saying not to despise really this people. Didn't he just say that he despises them? No, he goes not their way, despisers of the body. He did point out that he doesn't hate these people, but that they just don't contribute to that bridge. My brother, when thou hast, let me take a drink. Joys and passions. My brother, when thou hast a virtue, and it is thine own virtue, thou hast it in common with no one. To be sure, thou wouldst call it by name and caress it. Thou wouldst pull its ears and amuse thyself with it. And lo, then hast thou its name in common with the people, and hast become one of the people, and the herd with thy virtue. Better for thee to say, ineffable is it, and nameless, that which is pain and sweetness to my soul, and also the hunger of my bowels. Let thy virtue be too high for the familiarity of names, and if thou must speak of it, be not ashamed to stammer about it. Thus speak and stammer. That is my good. That do I love. Thus doth it please me entirely. Thus only do desire the good. Not as the law of a god do I desire it. Not as a human law or a human need do I desire it. It is not to be a guidepost for me to super earths and paradises. An earthly virtue is it which I love. Little prudence is therein, and the least everyday wisdom. But that bird built its nest beside me, therefore I love and cherish it. Now sitteth it beside me on its golden eggs. Thus shouldn't thou stammer, and praise thy virtue. Thus not shouldn't, but shouldst thou stammer, and praise thy virtue. Once hast thou passions, and calledst them evil, but now hast thou only thy virtues. They grew out of thy passions. Thou implantedst thy highest aim into the heart of those passions, then became they then became they thy virtues and joys. And though thou wert of the race of the hot-tempered, or of the voluptuous, of the fanatical, or the vindictive, all thy passions in the end became virtues, and all thy devils angels. Once hast thou wild dogs in thy cellar, but they changed at last into birds and charming songstresses. Out of thy poisons brewest thou balsam for thyself. Thy cow, affliction, milkest thou. Now drinketh thou the sweet milk of her udder, and nothing evil groweth in thee any longer, unless it be the evil that groweth out of the conflict of thy virtues. My brother, if thou be fortunate, then wilt thou have one virtue and no more. Thus goest thou easier over the bridge. Illustrious is it to have many virtues, but a hard lot. And many a one hath gone into the wilderness and killed himself because he was weary of being the battle and battlefield of virtues. My brother, are war and battle evil? Necessary, however, is the evil. Necessary are the envy and the distrust and the backbiting among the virtues. Lo, how each of thy virtues is covetous of the highest place. It wanteth thy whole spirit to be its herald, It wanteth thy whole power, and wrath, hatred, and love. Jealous is every virtue of the others, and a dreadful thing is jealousy. Even virtues may succumb by jealousy. He whom the flame of jealousy encompasseth turneth at last, like the scorpion, the poisoned sting against himself. Ah, my brother, hast thou never seen a virtue backbite and stab itself? Man is something that hath to be surpassed, and therefore shalt thou love thy virtues, for thou wilt succumb by them. Thus spake Zarathustra. Okay, so he's first saying that your joys and passions, it's okay to have things inside yourself that fulfill yourself, these virtues. But if someone were to ask, what is it? That you couldn't say it clearly. And he says, no, that's a good thing. That's a unique thing. It's not something that you're just doing and following because everyone else is doing it, but it's something you found and you discovered for yourself, something that's meaningful to you. And if someone were to ask, why is it meaningful? Well, it's, you don't have a frame of reference. You don't have a word for it, a label for it. It's something new. Perhaps there is a word for it, and maybe you just don't know it. But that's okay, because to you, in that feeling, you've discovered it as something that was brand new, something, I guess, you invented within yourself. And in that, though, I guess he's saying is what makes you unique. And not necessarily just looking, like, say we had a list of everything that you can feel as a person, and you just go through the list one by one. Yeah, I don't really like this one. This one's fun. This one's nice, but no, I want something more. You know what I mean? You don't go through life like through a checklist. You find something and it's like, wow, that was amazing. What was that? And it's worth finding those things, those virtues. But then he goes on to say about a war and battle. Sometimes with these virtues, it does create a battle within yourself, a struggle within yourself. But that internal struggle is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Going back a couple of days, talking about sleep, and that every day for your virtues, you must go through the 10 virtues, and that if you don't, it will cause you to stay up at night. I'm just being brief about it. We spoke about it before. So that battle, however, though, is normal. That struggle is normal, and that you should do it during the day, not at night, because then you lose your sleep. The pale criminal. You do not mean to slay, ye judges and sacrifices, until the animal hath bowed its head. Lo, the pale criminal hath bowed its head. Out of his eye speaketh the great contempt. Mine ego is something which is to be surpassed. Mine ego is me, the great contempt of man. So speaketh it out of that eye. Okay, so the struggle is with your own ego. He also did make a point here that these virtues that are created, they're not something that's just a normal part of just being alive. Like hunger, for example. You struggle with hunger. Well, hunger is not a virtue. It's just a part of being alive. That's just something that happens. And there are other physical, emotional needs that a person has, but those aren't really the virtuous things. And that something beyond those things, once those things are satisfied, it's called a hierarchy of needs. Once those base needs have been satisfied, people tend to want to develop other things. Once hunger is satisfied, once shelter is satisfied, people begin to develop friendships meaningful friendships. They begin to be selective about who they spend their time with and such, because you want those people to compliment you, to build you up, and not drag you down. And once you've satisfied that, what happens next? And therefore, it's a hierarchy. You have to satisfy some of the lower base needs before you can truly explore the other deeper ones. But what he's saying, these virtues are not those. They're not any of those base needs, but it's something that can create a struggle within you. But that's just part of being alive. In some ways, he's labeled this as an ego, and that you should overcome that ego. Mine ego is something which is to be surpassed. It is the great contempt of man, so speaketh it out of that eye. When he judged himself, that was his supreme moment. Let not the exalted one relapse again into his low estate. There is no salvation for him who thus suffereth from himself, unless it be speedy death. Your slaying, ye judges, shall be pity, and not revenge. And in that ye slay, see to it that ye yourselves justify life. It is not enough that ye should reconcile with him whom ye slay. Let your sorrow be love to the Superman. Thus will ye justify your own survival. Enemy shall ye say, but not villain. Invalid shall ye say, but not wretch. Fool shall ye say, but not sinner. And thou, red judge, if thou wouldst stay audibly all thou hast done in thought, then would everyone cry, away with the nastiness of the virulent reptile. But one thing is the thought, another thing is the deed, and another thing is the idea of the deed. The wheel of casualty doth not roll between them. An idea made this pale man pale. Adequate was he for his deed when he did it, but the idea of it he could not endure when it was done. Nevermore did he now see himself as the doer of one deed. Madness, I call this. The exception reversed itself to the rule in him. The streak of chalk bewitched the hand, the stroke he struck bewitched his weak reason. Madness after the deed, I call this. Hearken ye judges, there is before madness besides, and it is before the deed. Ye have not gone deep enough into this soul. Thus speaketh the red judge. Why did this criminal commit murder? He meant to rob, I tell you. However, that his soul wanted blood, not booty. He thirsted for the happiness of the knife. But his weak reason understood not this madness, and it persuaded him. What matter about blood, it said, wishest thou not, at least, to make booty thereby, or take revenge? And he hearkened unto his weak reason, like lead lay its words upon him. Thereupon he robbed when he murdered. He did not mean to be ashamed of his madness. And now once more lieth the lead of his guilt upon him, and once more is his weak reason so benumbed, so paralyzed, and so dull. Could he only shake his head, then would his burden roll off. But who shaketh that head? What is this, man? A mass of diseases that reach out into the world through thy spirit. There they want to get their prey. What is this, man? A coil of wild serpents that are seldom at peace among themselves, so they go forth apart and seek prey in the world. Look at that poor body, what it suffered and craved. The poor soul interpreted to itself. It interpreted it as murderous desire and eagerness for that happiness of the knife. Him who now turneth sick, the evil overtaketh, which is now the evil. He seeketh to cause pain with that which causeth him pain. But there have been other ages, another evil and good. Once was doubt evil, and the will to self. Then the invalid became a heretic or sorcerer. As heretic or sorcerer he suffered, and sought to cause suffering. But this will not enter your ears. It hurteth your good people. Ye tell me, but what doth it matter to me about your good people? Many things in your good people cause me disgust, and, verily, not their evil. I would that they had a madness by which they succumbed, like this pale criminal. Verily, I would that their madness were called truth, or fidelity, or justice. But they have their virtue in order to live long, and in wretched self-complacency. I'm just going to pause here. So he's going back to these terms he's mentioned before, self-complacency and such. But I think the point of it was this person who goes out to murder somebody. And it's kind of like they're saying, your money or your life. And this person, they're not really after the money. They're not really trying to rob somebody. They just wanted a reason to attack them. Oh, he didn't give me the money, so I attacked him. But that's truly what he's saying this person really wanted. They wanted to satisfy themselves by attacking somebody. But in order to justify it, they created the robbery scenario. And then afterwards, after having stabbed the person, they then robbed the body because, oh, well, yeah, right, I'm trying to justify it. I wasn't out here just to murder somebody. It was a robbery, I say. Yeah. And so this person, they're not being honest with themselves. They're not being truthful with themselves. He's calling that a madness. And that people, as he's saying, these people who live in their normal world, it's not their evil, but somehow these people, when they chase their self-complacency, what they're doing is analogous to that act of saying you're robbing somebody when you really want to murder them. And that there are people who also have this madness in their normal lives. Their wretched self-complacency also does these things. But they're not seeing the truth of what it is they're really after. And the good people, as he says. And this is why the good people cause him disgust. Because they also do this thing. I am railing alongside the torrent. Whoever is able to grasp me, may grasp me. You're a crutch. However, I am not. Thus spake Zarathustra. So you're a crutch, I'm not. If I am railing alongside the torrent, whoever is able to grasp me may grasp me. Your crutch, however, I'm not. If you understand him and walk with him, cool. You can be a kind of his companion, but he's not going to carry you, he's saying. He won't be a crutch. If you can't walk at that level, then that's your issue to reach, to overcome, to solve. If your own inner struggles to deal with. But once you've overcome, then sweet, you can hang out with me. We're like company, but I'm not going to carry you. It's kind of weird that just to insert that in there. Reading and writing. If all that is written, I love only what a person hath written with his blood. Write with blood, and thou wilt find that blood is spirit. It is no easy task to understand unfamiliar blood. I hate the reading idlers. He who knoweth the reader doth knowing more for the reader, doth nothing more for the reader. Another century of readers, and spirit itself will stink. Everyone being allowed to learn to read ruineth in the long run, not only writing, but also thinking. Everyone being allowed to learn to read ruineth in the long run, not only writing, but also thinking. So I think he's saying here that if you are allowing the flock to read and write, then the flock are also going to write. So what is the flock going to write? Well, they're going to write things about the flock. And in some ways, he doesn't like that because art is reading and writing. I think he wants to be the thing that stands out, that causes people to think, causes people to have deeper thoughts. I guess it's similar with me with video games. I critique a lot of video games that I play because I want something more out of video games. But yet there are so many games available that we see games that are kind of under par. It's like a tutorial. Somebody has just learned their tutorial and they've finished it and it's playable as a game, and now they go out and publish it. And to me, it's like, who would play that? It's not meaningful. Maybe if you've never played a game before, it's meaningful. But as a game, it's not great. People have done that before. All you've done is just a tutorial to learn. And you're publishing that? Like, you haven't done anything yet. All you've done is what you've been taught. It's not unique. It's not significant. So why should we celebrate it? Why should we play it? Right? So this person, he's saying, why should we have everybody learn to read and write? Because if they don't have great thoughts, if they're not contributing, and if all they're doing is just writing because they've learned how to write, that's just going to give me so many books that are meaningless. And that it's going to, in the long run, not only ruin writing, but also thinking. That people who are thinking individuals, they're reading to gain more knowledge. But if all you're finding is trash, is garbage, then how can you become a thinking individual? In some ways, this upsets me, but at the same time, it's like, wait, I do this. Hold on a moment. Because I do that with games. Okay. And yeah, game making being as accessible as it is, that with a tutorial, after going through a week, a month of working at it, the tutorials, they don't solve themselves. I was having a talk with another streamer, Mecharazium, the other day, and he's learning how to use Unity. He's learning to write video game code. And he completed something, and I said, no, that's a good thing. One thing I heard from a very famous person, his name is, he's the guy who wrote Sandman, the comic books, the Netflix series, Neil Gaiman. There it is. So Neil Gaiman, I did a master class. As a student, I was able to go to a website. It's called Masterclass, and you can learn writing. You can learn playing music from Hans Zimmerman. You can learn game development from one of the guys who had created The Sims. Right, so Neil Gaiman, he did this talk about writing creative things. And I had a point. Shoot, I've forgotten the point. I remembered who the person is, but now I've lost the point. What was the thing he taught? He taught a lot of things, but there was one in particular I wanted to remember. Right, got it. So when writing a book, the first thing you need to do is write. And this goes back to what Mecharazium was doing. It's difficult to sit down and write a first draft. It's supposed to be a first draft. How are you going to complete a book unless you write something, anything, even if it's just a few plot points? And after you've written the plot points, to go back through and then flesh them out, give them character, add some little sense of this character It's like character development, you know what I mean? Where this person is this sad individual who's sad all the time, but yet there's a development, something he's now excited about, and now he's pursuing it. And you're not going to get that unless you start writing something, and then you start adding in those details, and then you add through it again. And so it takes that first draft of doing something the first time before you can begin to build something good. Mekarazium has just completed something for his first time, and there was a lot of errors and a lot of issues to go through. Just following a tutorial is not an easy process. You have to painstakingly figure out through trial and error what does and doesn't work. But yet, when you reach that end and it's like, it works, it's running, yes, it's a very happy moment. It's like, I did it, I achieved this thing. Granted, you may have only just achieved the tutorial and you feel good about it, but it doesn't mean it's a game. It doesn't mean it's a book. It shouldn't be published. You know, there's nothing wrong with your joy because you've accomplished something, but you're completing a tutorial. Let's be real. The tutorial is to give you that knowledge so that way you can begin to build on your own. And the things you begin to build on your own, those are the things that should be shared. So that's my feeling about video games. And this person is saying the same thing about writing, why they hate the reading idlers. I know I'm just stressing the point, but this one's meaningful to me because that one punched me in the gut. You know, I was reading this and I was like, how dare this person say that, to not let people read and write? Because this answers the question. The question I mentioned at the beginning of today's stream. Why do these people who talk about philosophy write so densely and with this gaudy language? When, as I was saying, people have a hard time trying to read as it is to begin with. Why make it these words so thick and difficult to understand? Well, they're trying to protect knowledge. It seems silly. It seems very vain. And I agree, it is very vain. And that's why those people who write like this, and that one famous person who built his own cabin, it's probably why I don't remember their name, because I don't like them for what they did, for doing that, for hiding away this knowledge as like some sort of gaudy treasure that should be kept buried and hidden away. I guess you have to work for it, but the reading is difficult. Why make it difficult to understand? It's like trying to teach somebody math in a language that they don't speak. You're making it far more difficult than it needs to be. Does that mean you're going to value it more? Well, more often than not, most of the people are never going to understand it. They're never going to train themselves to learn how to get through that language to grasp what it is. And I don't know, is it going to allow you to value that thing that you've gained out of it even more? I don't think so. I think it's just being elitist, honestly. It's like saying, hey, this is a really great video game, but if you want to play it, you have to spend like $100,000 to buy the game. And you're just creating this false wall. It might work. I might be willing to try that. My next game, you know, it's very simple. It's an idle game, but it costs $10,000 to play. It might sell a couple copies. Just because somebody feels like, okay, this is a rare thing. Then it'll get pirated. It'll probably get pirated a lot. Right. I'm going off on a tangent. I like to, because in some ways those tangents help me to understand what the heck it is I'm reading sometimes. And yeah, that does answer my question. I think that's what made me angriest, is that I was reading the answer to my question on why philosophy or this book is written in such this heavy, gaudy language. Is that not, though, being or acting out on your ego to be like, I am one of the elite who can read this. I am one of the elite who also does write this. I am like a king amongst all the people. Is that not feeding the ego? Have you really achieved what you're going for after, with philosophy, if that's the case? One spirit was God, then it became man, and now it even becometh populace. He that writeth in blood and proverbs doth not want to be read, but learnt by heart. In the mountains, the shortest way is from peak to peak, but for that route, thou must have long legs. Proverbs should be peaks, and those spoken to should be big. Wait, and those spoken to should be big and tall. So yeah, he's just enforcing the point about why these things should be like mountains. But once you reached one mountain, then you can traverse from one mountaintop to the next. But you need to have long legs for that. Proverbs should be peaks. The atmosphere rare and pure. Danger near, and the spirit full of a joyful wickedness. Thus are things well matched. I want to have goblins about me, for I am courageous. The courage which scareth away ghosts createth for itself goblins. It wanteth to laugh. I no longer feel in common with you. The very cloud which I see beneath me, the blackness and heaviness at which I laugh, that is your thundercloud. Ye look aloft, while ye long for exaltation. I look downward, because I am exalted. Who among you can at the same time laugh and be exalted? He who climbeth on the highest mountain laugheth the tragic plays and tragic realities, courageous, unconcerned, scornful, coercive, so wisdom wisheth us. She is a woman, and ever loveth only a warrior. Ye tell me, life is hard to bear, but for what purpose should ye have ye pride in the morning, and your resignation in the evening? Life is hard to bear, but do not affect to be so delicate. We are all of us fine, some terrasses and abscesses. What have we in common with the rosebud, which trembleth because a drop of dew hath formed upon it? It is true, we love life, not because we are wont to live, but because we are wont to love. Want or wont? Not because we are wont to live, but because we are wont to love. There is always some madness in love, but there is always also some method in madness. And to me also, who appreciate life, the butterflies and soap bubbles and whatever is like them amongst us, seem most to enjoy happiness. See these light, foolish, pretty, lively little sprites flit about, that moveth Zarathustra to tears and songs. I should only believe in a god that would know how to dance. And when I saw my devil, I found him serious, thorough, profound, solemn. He was the spirit of gravity. Through him, all things fall, not by wrath, but by laughter. Do we slay? Come, let us slay the spirit of gravity. I learned to walk. Since then have I let myself run. I learned to fly. Since then, I do not need pushing in order to move from a spot. Now am I light. Now do I fly. Now do I see myself under myself. Now there danceth a god in me. Thus spake Zarathustra. To me that reads as very prideful. That things should be written on the mountaintops. And that he laughs on those beneath him. Doesn't seem like a very wise individual to be like, I am above the clouds. I will laugh at all of ye beneath the clouds, because I have endured these struggles and I have reached this great place of wisdom. Right? Interesting line here, though. Wisdom is a woman, and she will only love a warrior. Okay, it's a neat little analogy. And in order to be the warrior, you must be the one who climbs this mountain. And that in climbing the mountain, that's what a warrior does. You have to strive, you have to become better than yourself to reach those heights, those peaks, and claim that wisdom for yourself. This is very different than the first chapter, where Zarathustra had come down from the mountain to speak to the people and to give them wisdom. And in the end, those people were ready to kill this man. They wanted to murder him because he came here speaking of things that none of them really understood. And in their misunderstanding, I guess they weren't able to grasp that wisdom. But here it's very opposite, where he's saying, if you want wisdom, you must earn it yourself. You must become like a warrior. You must walk to it. And I will not be your crutch. But if you can climb the mountain, hey, you can stand with me. Just don't think I'm going to carry you any further. It's very different. Okay. I think we can do a bit more. The tree on the hill. Zarathustra's eye had perceived that a certain youth avoided him, and as he walked alone one evening over the hills surrounding the town called the Pied Cow, behold, there found he the youth sitting, leaning against the tree, and gazing with a wearied look unto the valley. Zarathustra thereupon laid hold of the tree beside which the youth sat, and spake thus: If I wished to shake this tree with my hands, I should not be able to do so. But the wind, which we see not, troubleth and bendeth it as it listeth. We are sorest bent and troubled by invisible hands. Thereupon the youth arose disconcerted, and said, I hear Zarathustra, and just now I was thinking of him. Zarathustra answered, Why art thou frightened on that account? But it is the same with man as with the tree. The more he seeketh to rise into the height and light, the more vigorously do his roots struggle earthward, downward, into the dark, and deep, into the evil. Yea, unto the evil, cried the youth. How is it possible that thou hast discovered my soul? Zarathustra smiled and said, Many a soul one will never discover, unless one first invent it. Yea, until the evil, cried the youth once more. Thou saidst the truth, Zarathustra. I trust myself no longer, since I sought to rise into the height, and nobody trusteth me any longer. How doth that happen? I change too quickly. My today refuteth my yesterday. Often overleap the steps when I clamber. For doing, none of the steps pardons me. When aloft, I find myself always alone. No one speaketh unto me. The frost of solitude maketh me tremble. What do I seek on the height? My contempt and my longing increase together. The higher I clamor, the more do I despise him who clamoreth. What doth he seek on the height? How ashamed I am of my clamoring and stumbling. How I mock at my violent panting. How I hate him who flieth. How tired I am on the height. Here the youth was silent, and Zarathustra contemplated the tree beside which they stood, and spake thus. This tree standeth lonely here on the hills. It hath grown up high above man and beast, and if it wanted to speak, it would have none who could understand it. So high hath it grown. Now it waiteth and waiteth. For what doth it wait? It dwelleth too close to the seat of the clouds, it waiteth perhaps for the first lightning. When Zarathustra had said this, the youth called out with violent gestures, Yea, Zarathustra, thou speakest the truth. My destruction I longed for, when I desired to be on the height, and thou art the lightning for which I waited. Lo, what have I been since thou hast appeared amongst us? It is mine envy of thee that has destroyed me. Thus spake the youth, and wept bitterly. Zarathustra, however, put his arm about him, and led the youth away with him. And when they had walked a little together, Zarathustra began to speak thus. It rendeth my heart, better than thy words express it. Thine eyes tell me all thy danger. As yet thou art not free, thou still seekest freedom. Too unslept hath thy seeking made thee, and too wakeful. On the open height wouldst thou be, for the stars thirsteth thy soul, but thy bad impulses also thirst for freedom. Thy wild dogs want liberty. They bark for joy in their cellar when thy spirit endeavoureth to open all prison doors. Still art thou a prisoner, it seemeth to me, who deviseth liberty for himself. Ah, sharp becometh the soul of such prisoners, but also deceitful and wicked. To purify himself is still necessary for the freed man of the spirit. Much of the prison and the mould still remaineth in him. Pure hath his eye still to become. Yea, I know thy danger, but by my love and hope I conjure thee, cast not thy love and hope away. Noble, thou feelest thyself still, and noble others also feel thee still. Though thy bear thee a grudge and cast evil looks, know this, that to everybody the noble one standeth in the way. Also to the good, a noble one standeth in the way, and even when they call him a good man, they want thereby to put him aside. Then you would the noble man create, and a new virtue. The old wanteth the good man, and that the old should be conserved. But it is not the danger of the noble man to turn a good man, but lest he should become a blusterer, a scoffer, or a destroyer. I have known noble ones who lost their highest hope, and then they disparaged all high hopes. Then they lived thy shamelessly in temporary pleasures, and beyond the day had hardly an aim. Spirit is also voluptuousness, said they. Then broke the wings of their spirit, and now it creepeth about, and defileth where it gnaweth. Once they thought of becoming heroes, but sensualists are they now. A trouble and a terror is the hero to them. But by my love and hope I conjure thee, cast not away the hero in thy soul. Maintain wholly thy highest hope. Thus spake Zarathustra. So, this child who wants to gain wisdom, he hears Zarathustra, and it's like, I endeavor to be like this. I strive to be this way. And he's growing in leaps and bounds, and he's being incredibly successful. And he keeps using this analogy of a mountain, climbing a mountain. And he hates his yesterday self because his yesterday self was struggling at something. And the next day, he's striving on. I guess I can talk about game design. Just as Mikarazium was struggling in his very first endeavor, this character was saying he hated his past self. Maybe they're saying, I'm never meant to be a game designer kind of thing because I struggle at it. And he's saying, no, don't give up just because you struggle at it. I have known many others who desired to become nobles, and upon reaching a failure, they now hate all things that are successful. Hero, as they use as an analogy. It's like someone wanting to become a game developer, failing at it, and then hating other developers because their games are becoming successful, because they're doing better than the individual who failed. And because they failed, they they broke their own spirit, and now they creepeth about and defile where it gnaws. So it's kind of like they become toxic to the community. They're not really contributing, they're not really helping others and stuff like that. Not to say you have to do any of those things, but that they're constantly tearing down those people who are successful just because of the fact that they're successful. And it's like, what are you trying to achieve? You're not achieving anything anymore. What are you spending your time doing? Why are you still participating in this community? We call it toxic. I don't think he had a word for it then, Zarathustra. Yeah, I think I can sum it up to say, be careful when you strive for greatness, that in your failings that you don't become toxic. Cast not away the hero in thy soul. Keep striving. As Neil Gaiman says in his masterclass, you first have to put words down and then start building upon it to make a book. It's not a book. At the very beginning, if someone were to read it, they would say it's a failure. Perhaps that person who's failed at the game in their development, in their stumblings, maybe they're still in the process. They haven't reached that point of, it's not a game yet. You have only put down your tutorial. You're trying to sell that tutorial. It's not going to sell. It's just a tutorial. What is it that you're actually striving for? Use that knowledge that you've gained and gathered and do something with it now. And once you start to strive and do those things, if you fail with it, that's okay, because now you have more substance laid down that you can build upon. You can build upon a failure. If a game is a failure, what was the failure about it? Did you not climb your mountain further because of that failure? Or are you now toxic because of it? Hmm. Hmm. Thus spake Zarathustra. It's weird reading Zarathustra. Wow, a whole other day has passed. In some ways, I don't agree with some things, especially the gaudiness of these writings. And when I muse over these things, I'm not musing over them to try to explain them to any listeners. I do it for myself because I'm struggling to climb through the understanding of this book. And that's okay. Even if I'm understanding it incorrectly, that's fine because I'm still gaining something from it, and that's the point, right? Well, even if you don't like these parts, these musings that I'm going through, that's okay. I hope you're enjoying the game and you're sticking with it on the other days where I'm talking about just specifically game lore. But the game itself, the longing, I think all these things about philosophy are in some way what the longing is meant to be about. When we're digging through this lore, this feeling of longing, of waiting for something. As I mentioned, this game was never designed to fill yourself with 400 days worth of content. It's not meant to give you more than enough to do that you can constantly keep playing it and still have more to do. You can run out. Once these books are finished, there's nothing left. Fortunate that it helps pass the time, but eventually you will run out of content. And that's the point, though. This game wants you to feel that longing, that feeling of time. Can't we just make it move faster to get to what it is that we wanted? And in some ways, you know, these things that we're reading about philosophy, it's why are you trying to just waste your time? Like saying an old man to a young man, why are you trying to hasten to death? Why don't you just enjoy it for what it is on that day by day? I think we'll set the shade to read something. Something. We'll want to look at some of the poems. That's a short one. I don't think we're going to read it ourselves. Six Swans. I think that has some cool stuff in it. Fables. That's a long one. I think there's some interesting fables in there we'll want to look at later. It's a short one. We'll leave the shade to read this on his own. Make sure we set him to idly read. Keep reading. Sit down. You are not finished. You have just begun. There we are. I guess we have to just leave the screen like this. Yeah. Looking forward to tomorrow. We're going to go to the Crystal Caves, the place where we couldn't jump down. The moss has had plenty of time to grow. And we'll explore that. And time permitting, we'll take another trip to the Halls of Eternity and pick up some more paper so that way we can draw and continue to decorate, and it'll be a new way, or it'll add to the way we pass time.